Well, hi there. Welcome to 30 Days to Understanding the Bible. I am your host, Jeanette Doobie, and I'm so glad that you stopped by to see us today. We are going to take an exciting journey through the Bible, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, over the next 40 sessions. Yes, you guessed it, 40 sessions. I'm going to be recording these sessions one chapter at a time. So feel free to jump in whenever you want. You can watch the sessions whenever you want to. And I hope and pray that through these sessions, the Bible will come alive to you. You know, many of us have not read the Bible before. Many of us have only picked it up and glanced through it. I think some of us feel intimidated, a little overwhelmed by what we read. We don't understand what we're reading. And I hope that this course, 30 Days to Understanding the Bible by Max Anders, is going to give you more of a comfort level. And it will create some excitement that you'll want to pick the Bible up and start reading it, because God has a lot to say in that book to us. It's his personal love letters to us. So we are going to embark on a journey that is going to take us deep within the Old Testament and the New Testament, but keeping in mind that this is a basic overview of the Bible. And so while we will look at specific people and look at specific chapters, etc., we're looking at a basic overview of the Bible. You know, there was a man who was a very smart man. He was an engineer, and he had retired. And he got a call from a major appliance manufacturer. And they were having a problem in one of their electrical systems that was in the machine. But they couldn't figure out which one. And so they called this guy, and they asked him to come out, and they asked him to check out their machines and see if he could pinpoint the problem, because they had not been able to. So he came out there and he looked at each machine and he run tests, and he put a chalk mark on the machine that he thought was the problem. And they said, oh, well, that just can't be. And he said, I'm telling you, that's it. And they're like, okay, well, what do we have to lose? We're going to open up this machine, see if this is the place where we're having the issue. And sure enough, when they opened up the machine, they found the problem right where he had marked the X on the machine. They were ecstatic. And he's like, glad I could help. You'll get my bill tomorrow. And sure enough, he sent them a bill for $10,000. And they're like, $10,000? You were only out here for a couple of hours. We want an itemization. He said, okay, I'll itemize the bill for you. One chalk mark, $1. Knowing where to put it, $9,999. Right? You got to know where to put the chalk mark. Well, the Bible's the same way. Knowing how it's set up and knowing where things are and knowing where to look is a big part, I believe, of mastering the Bible. And so does Max Anders, who wrote the book 30 Days to Understanding the Bible. He helps us get the geography down, the locations of things, some key people. And so those are the things that we're going to look at. And today we're going to start in chapter 1. What you need to know is about the Bible is several things, but let's start out with the basics first of all. Many times I'll ask people, how many testaments are there? And they'll look at me like I said a foreign word. Like, how many testaments? Well, there would be 2. There would be Old and New. So you have 2 testaments, the Old Testament and the New Testament. How many total books are in the Bible? There'd be 66. Now, out of the 66 total books that you have in the Bible, in the Old Testament, you have 39. which would give you 27 in the New Testament. Now, out of the 39 Old Testament books that you have, there are 3 different types of books. Now remember, we're doing a basic overview. So 3 different types of books in the Old Testament. And let me tell you what those are, okay? First of all, you have historical. There are 17 historical books in the Old Testament, okay? So you have 17 historical or history, okay? Next, you have 5 poetry. Now, if we have 39 books altogether in the Old Testament, and we've got 17 history, 5 poetry, that leaves us with how many? Hopefully you didn't have to get a calculator out, but 17. And those are prophecy. Prophecy or prophetical. Okay. Now, out of the 17 prophecy books, or prophetical books, if you want to be fancy, 5 of those are major prophets. And 12 are minor prophets. So, out of 66 total books in the Bible, 39 in the Old Testament, out of those 39, you have 17 history books, 5 poetry books, and 17 prophetical books. Now, it's important to understand, and this is so cool when you think about this, and most people hadn't really thought about this, but it's so important that you understand that your 5 poetry and your 5 prophecy, or your 17 prophecy, were written during the time that the 17 history books were written. Okay? That helps when you have that little tidbit right there, it helps make reading the Old Testament so much easier, because you could be reading the Old Testament and you can't understand, well, I just read about this guy over here and now I'm reading about him again over here, and it's so confusing. Okay? It's because your 5 poetry books and your 17 prophetical books were written during the time that the 17 history books were written. Okay, I'll give you an example. Say David. David wrote a lot of the Psalms, which is a poetry book. Yet his life is detailed in the history books. And in the history books, what was going on with him in his life was laid out in history, but how he felt about it and how he cried out to God and the different things that he felt and thought and said would be found in Psalms, one of the poetry books. So that's an example of how you can find this in those. Okay, now let's look at the New Testament. If we've got 39 Old Testament books and we have 27 New Testament books, okay? So out of the 27, we have 5 history books. So we have 5 history. Those are your what we call Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then you have what we call the book of Acts, which is what tells us about the first church. Now, out of those, now we have, out of the 27 total, we have 5. Now we're down to, what, 22? So out of the 22, 13 of the books are labeled as Pauline epistles, or another word for epistles would be letters, and they were written by the Apostle Paul. So you have 13 Pauline epistles. Now, out of the 13 Pauline epistles, Paul wrote 9 of those letters to churches, okay? And 4 of the letters to individuals. Now, a lot of times we think when we read the letters or we read those Pauline epistles, those Pauline letters, we think that those were all individuals. When actually 9 of them were churches that he was addressing his letter to, and only 4 to individuals. So now we're left with, if we've got 18 so far, we have 9 books left, and those are known as the general epistles. So just to review, 39 Old Testament books, 17 history, 5 poetry, 17 prophecy, 27 New Testament books, 5 history, 13 Pauline letters, and 9 general epistles. Okay? All right, now let's look at what else Max has for us. Okay, so when we're looking at history books, what would you expect to find in the history book? History, right? When we're looking at poetry or prophecy, you would expect to find poetry or prophecy in those. When you're looking at the New Testament history, you expect to find history. New Testament, the first 5 books, the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the 4, actually, of the 5, they tell us about Jesus Christ and his life here on earth. The book of Acts talks about, as I mentioned earlier, the first church. So if you want to read about Jesus, you've heard about Jesus, and you want to know where to go, you're going to go to the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the 4 gospel writers, and they are who document Jesus' life here on earth. Okay? If you want to read about the Israelites and all the things they went through, the Jewish people, and all the things they went through, or you want to read about creation, how this all came to be, right? You want to read about Adam and Eve, then you're going to go to the Old Testament. If you want to read about Adam and Eve, you're going to be reading in Genesis. If you want to read about the Israelite people and them coming out of Egypt and crossing the Red Sea, you're going to be in Exodus and following. So knowing where to go is very helpful, very helpful. You know, I always say, if you can get the books of the Bible down, then when you have to find one of those books, you know right where to go. You know either to go to the beginning of it, the middle, or the end. It's very helpful to know the location. So it's very helpful to know, well, what makes up the 17 history books? It's the first 17 books in a Bible. And then after that, the next 5 are poetry. And then after that, it's prophecy. Then when you get to the New Testament, it's the first 5 books are history in the New Testament. 13 books after that are the Pauline letters, and the remaining books in the New Testament are your general epistles. So if you know which book is what, like if you know Matthew is a history book, it's one of the Gospels, you know New Testament, it's going to be right there. If you are looking for Genesis or Exodus or Deuteronomy, and you know those are history books from the Old Testament, then you know you need to look at the beginning of the Bible. It will be very helpful to get that down. And you'll see in the next several sessions, we're going to dive deep into those and look at 9 eras of the Old Testament and 3 eras of the New Testament. So look forward to the following sessions and join me there. All right, let me see. What else have I not covered that would help you? All right. I think we covered everything for this session. So let's just do one more review. Okay. How many total books are in the Bible? 66. How many testaments are there? 2. Very good. And we have 39 Old Testament books, 27 New Testament books, and you have your breakdown accordingly for those. Join me for session number 2, where we will start looking at the geography. Yep. That's next in session 2, the geography of the Old Testament. Wait until you see this. It is so exciting to be able to put places on a map that we have heard about and to be able to see for ourselves where this stuff took place. So thank you for joining me today. I'm so glad you did, and I sure hope that you will join me going forward and that you enjoy the sessions and the teaching lady. Thanks again. Bye-bye.